This podcast is brought to you by Al Jazeera.
Coming up in today's program, a child soldier tells all, animation with a Lebanese twist,
if it's not changing people,
and the Slam Poets Society in Chicago.
what's the point?
But first, Artsworld travels to London.
Hello and welcome to Artsworld. My name's Sakina Abdul Noor.
And my name is Munira Rashida.
And we're from the hip-hop act Poetic Pilgrimage. In our first film, we meet a group of green-fingered revolutionaries who are transforming London's urban, grimy spaces into flowering gardens.
This radical is preparing for some illegal action. The target, a large roundabout in South London. What he's doing breaks the law. What he's doing is gardening.
This roundabout is mostly lavender, but underplanted with two different kinds of red tulip.
Over the last 4 years, a group of green-fingered lawbreakers have transformed this grotty urban roundabout into a rural oasis. But it isn't their land to garden. Their leader is Richard Reynolds, part-time advertising executive, part-time guerrilla gardener.
Guerrilla gardening is the illicit cultivation of someone else's land, but normally that land is public land and it's neglected land. It's almost forgotten about by the local authority or whoever's meant to be looking after it. They're not planting anything.
Frustrated by this horticultural deprivation, he decided to take matters into his own hands.
It is criminal damage, what we do, technically speaking. But I'm glad to say that guerrilla gardeners who face serious trouble are few and far between. In the nearly 5 years that I've been guerrilla gardening, I've only been threatened with arrest once. It's not bad going.
It was in the mid-18th century, under the leadership of Capability Brown, that the idea of the English landscaped garden really took root. Gardens were not just pretty landscapes, gardens were now art. Guerrilla gardeners design and plant previously drab spaces, but is what they do art?
It depends whether you see gardening as an art form. I tend to see it more as a craft. But there are a lot of artists who are actively involved in the guerrilla gardening movement. For them, that statement, that picture, the vision of what they're achieving is all important.
I definitely see guerrilla gardening as art. I see it as a reaction to what's happening today.
It's a good way to make space that would otherwise just be looking bare and barren actually looking nice.
Instead of reacting harshly, you're reacting by beautifying an area. So I see it as art, but I also see it as political.
Sunflowers? Free sunflowers?
Here, Richard is at the recent G20 protests in London, recruiting.
Where do you think you might plant them?
I'm just going to go in Stoke Newington in our outside smoking area.
Okay. Okay, and into public place, perhaps into the...
Oh yeah, I live in Brixton at the moment, there's not enough green around there.
Many in the movement see this as a political art form, a form of resistance against governments who are failing to fulfil their duties to the land.
I suppose you'd like some sunflower seeds, would you? Sunflower seeds? My most audacious guerrilla garden, potentially the most risky, was right opposite the Houses of Parliament. 3 of us went there late at night last spring and planted sunflower seeds. We went back and weeded them a couple of times, but nobody intervened, and by August they were 3 meters high. A yellow, triumphant clump, a beacon opposite the seat of government.
I'm stood in the middle of the sort of powerhouse of how we funded the whole of London.
The lavender at the end of the summer is something we chop back, we dry out.
Then I'm part of the haberdashery division, and we spend at least 1 weekend, 2-3 weekends in October sewing lavender pillows.
Which we then sell.
Online, in local shops, to everyone we know.
And that raises hundreds more pounds for more planting later in the year.
Richard's hobby started small, local, but has mushroomed. Through setting up a website and writing a book on the subject, he found he's one of hundreds of illegal gardeners planting around the world, either as lone operatives or as teams. He has also found love.
I first met Richard the first time I went guerrilla gardening.
2.5 years ago, it was a tulip planting evening.
And I remembered that we didn't stop talking from the minute I got there.
The tulips are actually in flower now, so that feels good.
We were planting tulip bulbs.
I think the phrase is love blossomed, yes.
Meantime, as spring turns to summer in London, this guerrilla gardener has his work cut out.
London is home to many refugees escaping trouble back home. One such refugee was a 10-year-old Sudanese child who was forced into a soldier's training camp but managed to escape to Australia.
Near dawn, when all is still, my ancestors come to me. They bring me the taste of the land, ripe new corn stalks against the dampness of the River Nile, the sound of crackling fire, the scent of cattle, and the fresh milk that fills my belly every morning. Most of all, they bring the feeling of safety that came from my mother's warm embrace.
I became a child soldier at the age of 10. I'm one of the lost boys, and I've written a book called Color's Journey.
The families weren't given a choice. You had to give up a child, or cattle were taken, arrests made, and a child taken by force anyway.
The last day that I saw my mom was in '87, and she took me halfway to Peñado. We walked 7 days from our village to Ethiopia, and then from there she went back. So that was the last time that I saw her. She passed away. I haven't seen her again.
There were no tearful farewells. My mother simply said, "Go well." My mother didn't hug or kiss me goodbye. She just walked off into the distance. I didn't want to hug or kiss her, as I felt I had to control myself, to appear manly. To give way to my emotion might have let loose an unstoppable flood.
I became an adult at the age of 10. There was no mom to look after me, no dad, no brothers, nobody.
My first impression when we arrived at Peñado camp was amazement. There were so many children. It was a sea of little people. When we were old enough to hold a gun properly, we were considered ready to fight. If I stayed there, I knew that the need to survive would turn me into an animal. It took a long while to come to me that I had to leave, but once I decided, the need fell on me with full force.
The whole journey for me from my homeland until Australia took me about 14 years. In most cases, I was walking. My feet were really very tired. I couldn't walk no more. Sometimes we could just sit and say, no, enough is enough, I don't want to walk no more. From Sudan to South Africa, maybe 10,000 miles. And the reason why I was traveling is because I was just searching for a better place.
Throughout my journey, some people have helped me and some have turned away. Some people have been scared of me because I have such dark skin, and others see an honest man in desperate straits.
Hi Roy, how are you? Good, how are you? Good. Have you read the book?
I met Kola 3 years ago. Kola actually started doing his book here in this into the cafe. I think he finished the whole thing here, you know?
You know, every time I go, I didn't have the money. He was, hey, use the computer. And he asked me, what are you doing? I said, I'm writing a book. Okay, use the computer.
Hi, Kola.
Hi, Roy, how so he was the first person I ran to and give him the book.
He used to tell me, Roy, you're going to get the first copy. You're going to get the first copy. And I always ask him, Cole, you got it? I said, no, next week. But finally, he got it. And he signed it for me.
I believe people are all the same. We are just praising God in different ways. The fact is, we just only have different colors. but the blood is the same. If the blood is the same, then people are the same.
In a refugee camp.
I just walked around one time and I came across Lopez.
I fell in love with this dude pretty much, with the story of where he came from, and I started taking him out to all my gigs.
Yeah.
I started introducing him to all the big name DJs at the time. I remember he was asking me pretty much from basics.
I didn't know how the system worked, and then he had to tell me, Kola, you gotta look, it says side A and B, and this is song 1, song 2, song 3, and that's how it is, you know, and that's how I got into music. 1, 2, 1, 2. The books and the musics, I see it as the only way we can be able to get connected. You know, I want to have some sort of connection with people.
One more time, I say one more time, I'm so worried.
I get my ideas of writing songs from all the problems that are happening around the world, in Middle East, in Iraq, in Israel and Palestine, same thing in Sudan and Darfur.
About the struggle that I've been through, I spit it for you, so that you know now, for when it's gone down. Make some noise, yo! Can't go back to living in a war zone.
I just want to be able to pass the message, to encourage those who are also struggling, not to give up and to keep trying.
Last but not least, I ain't never time to get a please. Pay attention, grind makes you late, grind makes you crazy.
What an amazing story. We're gonna go for a break now. When we come back, we'll be going from London's South Bank to Chicago's South Side to check out some slamming poetry. See you on the other side. Welcome back to Artsworld. We're at one of London's most famous galleries, Tate Modern, standing in front of the latest of the Unilever series, a massive spider sculpture. And now, from the gigantic to the tiny, next we meet pioneering Lebanese artists who use tiny clay sculptures to get across a very political message.
I expect to deliver a message without the need of talking.
KHOURY is Lebanon's first graphic novelist. For almost 3 decades, his newspaper comics, television cartoons, and clay animated films have captured a uniquely Beirut experience.
What I usually work on is what I remember of, like testimonial elements. Maybe because it's a reaction to the war that we lived, I don't know. I know we need to have always this reference to the place that we are afraid of losing, of the little details that we are afraid that another war will wipe away.
In the late 1980s, Jad formed a group of young Beirut artists who chronicled the life of their city in darkly brilliant graphic novels. Since then, he and his team have pioneered the art of clay animation in Lebanon. Their most recent creation is a Beirut everyman called Atta. LINA GHIBEH was Atta's initial creator.
So we knew we wanted to create this popular character who was very wise but not intellectual, who was loved by all and blunders and goes against the system. He does what he wants, but you always tend to like him. And he's the anti-hero, sort of.
With clay animation, we went back to feel a texture of clay.
You have to think just in terms of, you know, keep him plain colors because you don't want the Play-Doh to mess up when you're moving it around, so you can't have checked shirts and striped pants and so on.
Atta is a tribute to the average man in Beirut, which, like most cities, tends to immortalize only the powerful.
He is more or less a figure, an image that is in every brain of a Beiruti. This is what we call sometimes the collective consciousness of an ideogram, that people can project or recognize themselves through.
It's the magic fingers of Suhaib Bala'a who first started the clay animation sculpting. The making of Atta is the latest artistic phase for Jad and his team. Clay animations are produced through a stop-motion technique using a digital camera. Thousands of still images are imported into a computer and then exported to video. For a 90-second clip, Jad's team must work 4 to 6 weeks. Animated films are the most recent phase of KHOURY's distinguished career. He began a tradition of comics for adults when the art was unknown both in Lebanon and the wider Arab world.
The aim was to address the adults with this medium that is the comics, and address the adults and make the comics really as a form of art with a big A. For me, it was like that. It was my political, my social, and my artistic medium to express myself.
Adult comics in 1980s Beirut were revolutionary.
I was considered like the terrorist who's coming to the to the established art. What are you talking about? That comics is the new form of art?
The experience of daily life in Beirut informs the personal and often intimate storylines of the group's work.
It was art imitating life. It was civil war Beirut, so it was heavily related to the area. It was what we were living. It was our influences, whether they're the street signs and the gunshots and the holes in the buildings.
All what we try to integrate in our claymation, in our animation, in the comics that I used to do. For me, I have to preserve the memory of a city that I don't know. So I need something, at least virtual, to keep.
Finally, slam poetry is rhythmic performance street poetry born out of the south side of Chicago.
Artsworld went to America to meet the guy who pioneered this form of expression.
Welcome to the slam, everybody. This is the first slam. There are slams all over the world. There are slams in London, Ireland, South Pole, Singapore, Australia, Madagascar, Fargo, North Dakota, Berwyn, Springfield, Kalamazoo. They all started here, and I'm the guy that started them. My name's Mark Smith. What makes your slam different than your ordinary poetry reading is that you, the audience, are always in control.
We haven't always been close for not, we were close when you're growing up, but then we kind of broke off.
Yep.
And this was like the step back into, and we really worked pretty good together, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. This is a new mic, so we'll see if you like it.
The blues when swinging trumpets blow goes blue as red, the rhythm cuts the rain with saucy cinder beats and blackbirds hop the hi-hat lines. It's a scat's manner scene.
In cellar grays where notes collide, the bulb's half eclipse cleaves the brain, and death the wailing madman cries. Leaves me half-breaths, baby.
Lilliputans who wore heavy coats were marked for mockery. Scarves were an invitation to be choked.
Circle one another, take shots at the other's defenses.
It pushes past the pills and all the cheap thrills of knowledge is powered.
My black Superman, my volcano of work.
It's like yesterday never happened or tomorrow doesn't need thinking about. The music is just there.
I am so fragmented, I've begun to believe all mirrors are broken. I am stable. I am unfixable.
Working with you and like being able to find that way to like express myself was probably the best thing.
You take the technique, you take the writing that you did, you take the ideas, but then there's something deep inside your soul or your spirit or whatever it is that brings it and makes it so completely alive. So
Before the bread cools down, smear it with sweet salted butter and smash it with your fingers. Crumble it up in a bowl of collard greens or buttermilk. Forget that I'm telling you, it's the first thing I ever cooked, that my daddy was laughing and breathing and no bullet in his head when he taught me. Mix it till it looks like quicksand, he'd say, till it moves like a slow song sounds.
It's really important how the poem hits the air for me. I got one shot. It might be 3 minutes, might be 5, might be 1, but I got that one shot. And I don't think of it as performing. It's like, this is my mode of transport for poems now.
for me at the beginning, that's what it was all about. Poets do not know how to take the good ideas and the good writing they have and transport it to an audience so that the audience can get it.
So bend that note like your first drink of water in days. Break its neck over the boots of the dead. Sing it at the broken walls of Fallujah and listen for the echo. Practice your harmonica every night so the night will hear you.
We used to sit in the back of the mill and talk, because it was also a social thing, so we'd be like, blah, 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 and Mark would come back, and we would feel like our father had just come.
Where's that father?
We won't talk anymore in the back of the room. You know?
Hangs with the blackbirds. Up on those high, hot lines.
Up on those high, hot lines. It's a dead man's crooked thing.
I wrote that before I was anything. That when I hadn't met anybody. It's like this feeling of destiny that you gonna get this out. I ran off copies of that poem on sticky paper. I'd go to all the taverns downtown and I'd stick it on the bathroom walls.
For me, there was a turning point where I understood that art is not just this thing for art. If it's not changing people in a real way, what's the point?
Wow, I love slam poetry.
Well, that's it from us here in beautiful, windy London.
Thank you for watching Artsworld with us Poetic Pilgrimage.
Check you later.
See you later.